So Jamie, thank you for joining me here on 44th Street, where Sunset Boulevard is playing.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And also where Tom Francis sings live 8 times a week.
In all weathers.
In all weather.
Rain, snow, any kind of weather. Throw anything at him and he'll still do it.
Tell me about making that decision to take the show outside and what it opened up for you.
You know, it was so funny because we didn't really plan this originally in the original rehearsal period in London. I remember I went into rehearsals with Tom and I said, look, how are we going to do this title song? And he said, well, it's such a great song, it's such an iconic number. I'll just kind of like, you know, I'll stand center stage and I'll sing it. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go for it. And as he was singing, this idea came to me that we would start off in his dressing room and kind of go all the way through the building. And then just at the point where you think he's gonna step on stage and sing the song, he then leaves the building. And it's just been a kind of like an adventure to kind of work out the route all the way along here and into Schubert Alley.
It's so unpredictable with Times Square and the tourists and the people walking by.
Yeah. I mean, it's like amazing, but that's like kind of a part of it, that like whatever you experience, whoever sees it, what other characters might be there, might be around, might be a part of the story. It's kind of like, it's like Broadway, the streets of Broadway, the streets of New York, kind of become like a kind of stand-in for the streets of Hollywood, the streets of LA. And I love that. You know, like when he comes to this picture, he stands at this and he sings, sure, I came out here to make my name. And of course, he's singing as Joe Gillis, but he's also singing as Tom Francis, coming to Broadway and becoming this kind of amazing kind of Broadway star that he's turned into. So it kind of works on many, many levels.
You know, I love in many of your productions that you remind us that we're watching a show. You let us see the seams. What does that open up for you in telling the story?
Well, it really comes from a kind of starting point that we're saying that the starting point for all of our productions, not least Sunset Boulevard, is that there's a space and there's some people in it. So what we ask the actors to do is to find the characters within themselves and themselves within the characters. So it's not like they're kind of putting on something artificial. They're kind of finding kind of aspects of their own lives, their own experiences, and bringing those to the role. And hopefully that leads to like even more kind of like truthful, more honest performances.
And you are directing both for a live audience, because this is Broadway, and a live camera. So those are two different skills. Tell me about doing both of those.
Well, you know, it's the first time I've ever used cameras, and it just obviously made a lot of sense because, of course, Sunset Boulevard, you know, it obviously is based on Billy Wilder's iconic movie. So it came, you know, the language obviously is inherent, the cinematic language is inherent in the text. But of course, it's about movies and movie making and being on Hollywood. So it kind of made sense that that was a part of the language of the production. But what I love about it is that it's incredibly democratic because it's all about the kind of the language of the close-up. So wherever you're sat in the auditorium, even if you're in the balcony, you still have this very immediate connection with the actors, and you're seeing right into the whites of their eyes, and you're kind of really seeing into their minds and understanding what's happening on stage in a very, very kind of intimate way and very immediate way.
And unlike film, there's no take two.
There is no take two. Everything is live. Every single shot in this show is live. So we're kind of like on a knife edge every single night. Anything could go wrong at any time.
All right, I want to go back to your superhero origin story. What made you fall in love with theater? And was there a moment when you knew this was something you had to do?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about this kind of recently, and it's so odd because I didn't go to the theatre as a kid. You know, like my mother was a cleaner. She cleaned houses, and my father was a truck driver. Although, interestingly, I do remember sitting in the cab of my dad's truck, and we would go to various like industrial estates and kind of like, you know, long trips on long kind of British motorways and kind of like, you know, the kind of typical kind of grey English weather, and these long kind of trips on his truck, and he would always play Andrew Lloyd Webber. He was obsessed with Evita.
What is it with dads and Andrew Lloyd
I
Webber?
know, it was crazy, in his truck. So like, it's so odd, like obviously now working with Andrew, you know, like that was the kind of like score of my childhood. So
These
peculiar.
songs must be in your bones.
So they really are. But I never went to the theatre. It was a very, very interesting and kind of slightly peculiar childhood. At one point, my mother ran a fancy, what we call a fancy dress store. I think like a costume store, you know, like a kind of, you know, like kind of Halloween costumes, that kind of thing. And we lived for some time above the shop in a tiny apartment. And I would kind of sneak down and kind of dress up as various characters. And I would like, you know, for example, like recreate Michael Jackson's Thriller video with my cousins. We'd make like kind of like polystyrene gravestones and dress up as zombies. And
You really got to indulge your imagination.
literally like engage the imagination as a kid. And it was like this kind of like parade of very fascinating characters that would come into the shop and sometimes stay with us. We had a lodger who was a snake charmer at one point, and she used to keep her pythons in a paddling pool in the backyard.
Oh my God.
So as a kid, I would like paddle with these pythons. I mean, you couldn't make this up. It's such a weird childhood. So there was kind of like, you know, entertainment of some kind was like always around. My dad was like a drummer in a local band. You know, my first stepfather was like a kids entertainer. He would do like kind of kids' birthday parties. He was a clown called Uncle Funny. He was like, you know, and of course, inevitably like not funny in any way. And he would keep like tiny rabbits in the living room, and they'd poop all over the carpet. I mean, honestly, the weirdest childhood ever. But like somehow that kind of gave me this kind of like, yeah, like you say, kind of like engage the imagination, you know, and this kind of sense of play and creativity, and kind of, yeah, when I think back to that, I think that's probably why we kind of like, you know, we're here right now.
So let's talk about taking on Sunset Boulevard. Was there an idea or an image or a vision that launched you into this production?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so weird and kind of sounds a little pretentious, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I actually had a dream about doing Sunset Boulevard. It's totally true. So
An actual dream.
I actually had a dream. Now, it doesn't. I guess it's not so weird. I guess we all kind of process different things in our sleep. You know, our subconscious is like working overtime, isn't it? Like when we sleep. But I remember waking up. I had this dream. And I saw this image of like a very large video screen that was all white. And in front of it was a lone figure standing center stage in a black slip.
Starting to sound familiar.
It's starting to sound familiar. And she was kind of covered in blood. And I realized in that moment that that person was Nicole Scherzinger from the Pussycat Dolls. And I was thinking, Nicole Scherzinger needs to play Norma Desmond. Can you imagine like waking up and thinking that first thing in the morning? It was like waking up from some kind of weird fever dream. So I reached out to Nicole, who I had met a couple of years before.
What did you say to her? How did you approach this, and how did you describe what you wanted and convince her to do this?
Well, look, she was not flattered at all. She was like...
Well, you think of Norma Desmond and you think of
a more mature woman.
That's a nice way to put it,
and she said, "You want me to play this old has-been?" And she said, "Honey, I still look good under these bright lights." And I said, "No, look, like just kind of like don't think about like what's gone before." Mm-hmm. Obviously, the role is so, you know, closely associated with Glenn Close, who of course kind of came back to the role, you know, a number of times. But of course, when Glenn first played the role, I think she was like 46, 47, Patty was 45.
It made up to look older.
Yeah, maybe, but it's also the role is like, I mean, even, you know, Gloria Swanson was had only just turned 50 in the original movie. So we're not talking about like a kind of, you know, an older woman really. And actually it makes it much more tragic. That was kind of what I said to Nicole, that actually she has the experience of being incredibly famous. You know, she knows what it's like to be so famous and so celebrated as a pop star, and then kind of discarded and dismissed, kind of just like she was never given the opportunity to really show the world what she was truly capable of. And of course that's very Norma Desmond, you know, like this kind of like this idea that she was kind of forgotten. And that's what I love about it, you know, that suddenly the world is seeing what Nicole can really do. She's a phenomenal artist. Obviously she's a great vocalist, but she's an incredible actor. I mean, the stuff that she does, you know, throughout the show, but particularly at the end, you know, when she's like really goes to the kind of like real depths of, you know, humanity, and that it's very dark and very, you know, it's brutal what she does. It's kind of like almost like she could play Medea. And the fact that she does that with such conviction and such integrity is kind of remarkable. And I think was a massive surprise. You know,
I was going to ask you if it was a surprise, because she has said that she had to confront parts of herself in doing this role. Was that a surprise to you, or did she just go there?
I mean, she went there right from the beginning of rehearsals.
Wow.
But somehow I had this instinct. She always says to me, "How did you know? What made you think that I could do this?" And I can't explain it. I just kind of knew.
You have crazy dreams.
It was just crazy dreams. Like I just knew that she could do it, and she really has like gone above and beyond.
You make such big choices and take big swings. Was there anything that you did with Sunset Boulevard that scared you even a little?
I mean, doing that, like we were saying outside, doing the camera work for the first time was a whole new territory for me. But it was just like so thrilling. It was so exciting to explore that language, but totally unexpected. But to do that live every night, not just the walk around, but every single shot. Sometimes a lot of these shots would take hours to set up if you were filming them on a movie.
Right.
And the fact that this whole team kind of recreates these shots every night, you know, the precision of the lighting, the kind of haze and smoke effects, you know, obviously like the actors need to be exactly in the right spot, the camera operation, you know, live vision mixing. I mean, it's unbelievable, literally unpredictable. What I love about it when I watch it is that it's literally the definition of collaboration, because it really is like this amazing community of people that come together with real focus and discipline. But also like amazing passion to make it happen every night.
You have a tattoo. Well, you have many tattoos, but you have...
Yeah, I have one or two.
You have one or two. You have on your neck 10086, which is Norma Desmond's fictional address.
10,086, yeah.
There you go. Tell me, that's not just like a tribute, that's a mark.
Yeah.
So I want to know if that, like, have you ever done that before with a show? What did this show give you? What did it take from you?
This show has changed my life. I mean, I think I've directed, over 70 productions now. And this has just been like an amazing experience all around. And I guess, you know, like I was just so determined just to kind of, it's so hard as an artist, you know, you're constantly kind of thinking like, you have to really test yourself, not to worry what other people think. You have to just kind of make work from your heart. Like it has to come from you. And I was so determined to do that with this project and to go on this journey with this exceptional group of people that it felt like very appropriate to kind of mark the moment. It's one of the projects I'm most proud of, and I love being here. I love being on Broadway. I love being with this group of people. I love sitting backstage even if I'm not watching the show. We just have a really, really great time. And, you know, and it also brought someone very special into my life. I fell in love on the show. I met, you know, my new partner. So it's like a very significant part of my life. And like has kind of changed my life in ways that I didn't even expect. So it felt like a very, you know, important moment to mark on my body for life, I guess.